Hello to all that are joining us. Looking forward to our Neighboring 101 class today. We'll begin in about 5 minutes, it looks like. Give everybody a chance to get logged in today. Hoping it is dry and warm and comfortable where you're at. It's not here in Springfield, Missouri. It is cold, windy, and rainy.
That is, isn't it, David? It's good.
Yeah.
I miss being in the building and seeing people there.
Yeah, we're kind of all over the place anymore, aren't we?
Yeah. Well, I did get to volunteer at the Gardens Glow. And then I went with people who were either in the Federated Garden Club or had been a master gardener who'd never been to it. So I got to go more times. Yeah, I was shocked. In fact, I was actually shocked by one of them because she's also a city employee. But she said she didn't understand what it was. And then she was just like, oh, I have to bring my family. So that's glad.
Yeah, I hear there was some really good attendance for that.
Oh,
Good
gosh.
turnout.
One of my garden club mates, Barbara McDonald, and I went to volunteer on one of the coldest nights. And the thing I couldn't get over is how many people came. It made it worth being there. It really did.
Yeah.
And it's affordable.
It's affordable. It's grown a little bit every year, and it's a fun thing.
I was all excited to have the Wootons involved because, that shows deep and wide community involvement.
Oh, we'll continue to give everybody a chance to get logged in today. Looks like we got about 3 minutes until noon, and then we'll get rolling with the program today. See, somebody says it's nice and warm in Alabama. Sunny and 49 in Alabama. Well, I would expect that, I think.
Yeah. We'll pout just a little. I can tell you, my lab mix was excited about this morning. She likes that slightly cooler temperature. So David, I think one of the best classes I've taken through Extension Office beyond the Master Gardener program was that working with the movies that you did through MU a few years ago now.
Okay, over at the library station?
Yeah, the library station. I used it for different projects with Federated Garden Clubs. I used it with another group that no longer exists that I volunteered with. And then I've just plain liked it for my own creative outlet.
Good.
Yeah, the software stuff is caught up with this, but I really like just putting my own movie together, not doing the other.
Yeah. Well, when it's something you can put to use, it makes it even a little more practical. That makes it more fun for sure.
Yeah, it does. I've never been in a Zoom meeting with people I don't know before. So I haven't heard the story of anybody's grandchildren yet. Or 5,000 questions. Can you hear me?
Well, this is actually a small attendance today so far. We've been averaging about 80. We have nearly 300 that have registered for the program and to receive information. But as many of you know, if you can't make this Monday at noon class, we do record it and then share it out with everyone who has registered for the class. So there may be some taking advantage of that because of other conflicts and things. But I always want to try and make the best use of your time. And so it is straight up noon here, and we'll go ahead and get rolling while I try to simultaneously admit people as they pop up on my screen. So This is session 3 in our Neighboring 101 class. Our session today is going to focus on Neighborlink out of Fort Wayne, Indiana. But there's a few other things we have to talk about before then. So just a reminder, kind of a general welcome. This is Neighboring 101. These are free classes. They're designed to educate people on the power of neighboring and showcase some examples of neighboring and that neighboring movement all across North America, and hopefully give you some ideas on how to pursue neighboring and neighborhood improvements that can improve your own quality of life and your own community. My name is David Burton. I am the facilitator for Neighboring 101. I'm a community development specialist with University of Missouri Extension, headquartered in Springfield, Missouri. As we begin, I'd love for some of you in chat, or all that want to in chat, why don't you share why you're interested in this topic of neighboring, or what you are doing related to the topic of neighboring. It seems others enjoy seeing and hearing why others are involved with this topic of neighboring. And chat is a great place for you to share that. While you're sharing in chat, and we'll look at a few of those in a bit, but while you're sharing in chat, I'll just tell you a little bit about what to expect today. We're going to have a general introduction, a short book profile, a brief update on the Greene County Neighbor Pilot Project, and then about a 35-minute presentation with our guest speaker from Neighborlink. This one is pre-recorded, and we'll be sharing the video exclusively here in this class session. I think the next 3 classes we're going to have will all have presentations live. So kind of moving away from the pre-recorded, if that's the only way we can get someone. Then hopefully today we're going to have some time for Q&A for people in the group to share what they're doing and talk about questions that they may have. We want to hear from the general population in the class, and then some program updates and a few changes, all good changes to share at the end of our session. So one poll to begin with today. Did you do something special or new to introduce yourself to neighbors over the holidays, or really just a neighbor? I set the bar really low there, just a neighbor over the holidays. Go ahead and weigh in on that. We've got a few more people joining us. Good to have you from all over the U.S.
David, I baked cookies for the first time in my life and brought them to some neighbors that moved in a few weeks back.
Are they still speaking to you after your first attempt at baking?
I think that the cookie, I might have cooked them too long. They were a little hard, but hopefully it was the effort that counted.
Yeah.
For me, I'm the newest neighbor, so neighbor on each side, and the grandma that takes care of the little boy on one side of me, I gifted little small things to, and I have a lab mix, so I found a cheap little ornament at Hobby Lobby and made it look a little more like her and gave it to them, so they will love her like I do.
Yeah. All those things can be fun. We went Christmas caroling as a family this year. Now, I'm not sure if that was a gift or a punishment to our neighbors, but that's what we chose to do, is to do a little Christmas caroling. Everyone seemed to enjoy it, although it did seem like people were laughing a lot. I'm not sure how I'm supposed to interpret that, but it looks like of those of you that answered the poll today, about 50-50. Some of you took advantage of the holidays and use this as an opportunity to meet some neighbors. So thank you for sharing on that. This was a good time for that. So, well, one other timely note, and this is something to be thinking about in terms of service. Pardon me. Service is not only a path to success, it is success. And actually, Martin Luther King Jr., whose birthday we celebrate on Monday, said, anyone can be great because anyone can serve. And so this whole idea, this key to finding success in life, it's not who you know, but how you serve, really. So many people say they want to make a difference in the world, that they want to be successful, but they sometimes get bogged down in chasing inauthentic relationships, networking, or collecting social media likes. And there's really a better way to approaching that, a better way to approaching life. And that's with the heart of a servant and by putting other people first, building those relationships really with no strings attached. And serving creates both purpose and contentment. Serving creates value that lasts. It's not like temporary fame that fades. Serving can really change the world one person at a time. And you can find someone who is lonely or hurting and just and shine a little light on them. Be of service to them. Change one, then do it again. Change one, and then do it again. You don't need a license to impact someone. You just need to care. And a great place to practice service is with your immediate neighbors. This may be a great way to celebrate Martin Luther King Day on Monday with service to your neighbors, even with those you don't know by name. Maybe it's shoveling a sidewalk or mowing a yard or raking some leaves, or maybe it's taking some overdone cookies to them as a gift. These things all communicate relationship and can all be an act of service. And in a world that is filled with hate and division and disconnection, serving others really astounds the world. So serving changes the world because it changes others. One question to ask here, with Martin Luther King Day being on Monday, have you ever considered service to others as a way to celebrate Martin Luther King Jr. Day? We'll wait till other votes come in, but I see a few of you have already tapped yes, I already do this, because there are some communities around the nation where they have really put an emphasis on Martin Luther King Day being a day of service, often to the broader community, but you can make it a day of service with your immediate neighbors as well. That's got those that have already weighed in. So maybe it looks like some of you are familiar with this idea. But for many of you, it's a new idea, and maybe this is the year that you can do that. Hopefully we'll all have some nice weather that day and we can get out. Martin Luther King Day would be an excellent day to be of service to your neighbors. So just as promised each month, just a quick little book recommendation. And this one's a little odd, but I'm going to ask you a poll about it first here, I guess, to see maybe some of you have read this. A man called Uv. I've heard some people say Ova. Uva. Ovi. Ovi.
Yeah.
So some various pronunciations on this, perhaps. But this book doesn't make it on a lot of lists about neighboring, but it makes my list. And it's a fun read. And there are some great examples in that book about the impact of neighbors to overcome loneliness. Uva is the title character. He's a man of principle. He's also kind of a curmudgeon, and he's alone and he's lonely. And he and his neighbors are living sort of a fragmented experience of community when the story begins. Where there was once really a vibrant community of neighbors, there's now one that kind of just echoes the old life that used to exist. It's kind of a reminder to the characters on a regular basis about what they once had, but no longer have. And that is the case until this certain, as the author describes her, crazy pregnant foreign woman and her utterly ungovernable family shows up. And that changes everything. It is a great book anyway, but if you've not read it, it is a great example of neighboring and the power of it. It looks like those of you that have read the book rate it highly as a 5. If you've not read it and you want a entertaining read, it is a foreign language film, and I think maybe won an Academy Award as a foreign language film. But I understand that it's also contracts and works to make it a film here in the U.S. And supposedly Tom Hanks has signed on to the lead acting role. So you may hear a lot about it when the movie comes out. But if you've not read the book, I would recommend it. A great example of some neighboring taking place. And then before our guest speaker, thanks for everything that you're sharing in chat. I'll try and catch up on some of those. Some have asked about the Greene County pilot project we're doing on neighboring here in Springfield area. And just to catch you up on that very quickly, there'll be a time for a broader discussion. It starts in February. We have 8 neighborhoods that have signed on as pilot neighborhoods. It represents nearly 600 homes. These neighborhoods are very different, very diverse, and lots of different measurements, economics, residents, locations. And then we also have a pilot with 4 communities of faith, and we're doing quarterly newsletters. We're doing training events. We're helping the communities develop community directories and then associations for neighbors to join, and hosting a festival or a neighborhood event sometime in the next 18 to 24 months. It's kind of the length of the whole pilot project. And hopefully as data comes out of this, as we measure what we've done, we're going to have some great examples of good things to do and some examples of maybe things to avoid or to do differently. And I'll try and keep you apprised as we move along with that project. I think there's going to be some great information to glean from that. Now, some of you may be scanning through the chat as well. If you see someone in there that has mentioned something that's of interest to you, feel free to message each other and find out more details. I've been combing those too to look for maybe future guests to talk about what they're doing in the area of neighboring, because learning from each other is one of the best things that we can do. The guest that we had today, I'm going to share his recording. I learned about him 2 or 3 months ago. We did a recording specifically about something that's called Neighborlink in Fort Wayne, Indiana, and how they have used that to really impact the community of Fort Wayne, and it really get people involved in this sort of idea of service and neighboring as well. I think there's a lot of different aspects of this that can be interesting, and hopefully his presentation will maybe hit some high notes for you. I will tell you, because I know several of you have been interested in the past in following up on our guest speakers. I said we recorded this maybe a month or 2 ago. He just announced last week his resignation from Neighborlink, and I think yesterday was his last day. So if you try and reach him at Neighborlink, he's not going to be there. But the organization continues, and you can find a lot of information about them online as well to learn more about their about Neighborlink and how they go about their work. And hopefully you'll find this presentation of interest today as we go. Hopefully everybody can see this. If you can, I'll expand the screen.
When COVID hit and we started sheltering in place, 2 gentlemen out there, Macy Mitchell and Josh Matthews, really got all the churches and some of the agencies coordinated and working together like never before to help provide assistance. And that's a town of about 20,000.
Okay.
And so they have been talking about, is there something that we can do to kind of build on that momentum to continue this sort of community-wide effort? I may be biased, but I think Neighborlink is that option. I think that fits for them. The town of Willard was originally interested, but they have decided to invest monies in some economic development stuff instead, and have decided maybe this isn't their direction.
Yeah.
And then Tyler Gunlock was also on the invite list in Ash Grove. And they just decided last week they got a grant from the Community Foundation of the Ozarks for a GROW program. And their emphasis is going to be on community beautification,
Okay.
especially dealing with dilapidated and unkept homes.
Okay.
Now, they agree that there's still a fit here with what it's doing, but the grant monies they get is at least for this first year is really more for community visioning and coming up with a plan on how to deal with dilapidated homes and some of these other issues. So maybe Neighborlink's still down the pike for them.
Sure.
But anyway, I really admire what you have done there, and I know it's not you alone, but others. I really admire what has been done.
Well, thank you.
And just kind of wanted to learn a little bit more about the nuts and bolts and what a community kind of needed to do to really be able to get connected up with Neighborlink and get moving in the right direction as a partnership.
Sure. Well, thanks for reaching out and finding us. It's been a fun journey to be a part of myself, and see how Neighborlink can be a platform for connectivity to vulnerable neighbors and neighborhood development in a wide variety of ways, and really in the ways in which individuals want to take it. Historically, we really got started in the mid-90s through service-based evangelism and going out and serving, some local churches, doing tangible projects. And as they kept doing that and got more and more involved, they would eventually go to social service agencies and essentially say, what aren't you getting to? Surely you have projects for homeowners and individuals, or, your clients that your organization isn't able to economically or practically be able to do those. And they were like, sure. And they started building some trust with some organizations and started tackling these home maintenance, home repair needs, or these tangible needs that just had no owner.
Mm-hmm.
And quickly realized that there was more needs than they could keep up with. And at the same time, other groups would have interest in joining them. And so they would come and they would do a service events and people would show up, and eventually those groups would be like, well, we want to do it on this day and in this way. And, it becomes a logistical challenge. And it's less about that the groups can't do it on your own, or you need structure to make that happen. Really, they just need opportunities. And so this group originally funded the development of the first Neighborlink web platform in 2002 and created it as a separate 501c3. So Neighborlink kind of launched at the end of 2002, first 2003, essentially in the same method as it is now, just more robust. But we operate essentially as an online bulletin board. So our staff currently, we're connectors, communicators and connectors at the core of what Neighborlink is doing operationally every day. We're partnering with over 24 social service agencies, making sure that they understand what Neighborlink does. And so we'll collect close to 4,000 requests for assistance this year, wide-ranging stuff. Most of the projects are home maintenance and home repair for fixed income individuals trying to age in place. So 20% to 40% AMI, seniors, people with disabilities, low-income families. It could be somebody that had a cancer diagnosis and all of a sudden lost a job and their spouse has to take care of them and the hot water heater goes out, or whatever. Anything, neighbors can ask for anything. We don't turn anyone away. Our staff kind of tries to manage expectations, but we essentially allow any project to go on the website. About 80% come through our telephones. So we have a person dedicated to answering the phones, gathering information, making connections where possible to other organizations, but gathering that information in order to make sure that anybody can ask for help. And so we get that information put online for them. And then the rest comes from individuals that have access to technology and know how to work that. They can post their own projects, or the partner organizations. So say United Way's 211 call system, they've got case managers. They're already in the habit of gathering information. They'll post the project on behalf of that person. They let them know what's happening. And then they can get like the full circle experience in terms of if that project gets selected. And so all those projects go onto our website throughout the year. Projects kind of stay live for 75 days before they expire. Projects can be renewed, but it's kind of one way we keep the project list up to date. And then we work with 150 to 180 different groups of volunteers a year. Could be churches, businesses, civic groups. Most groups looking for kind of one-time, short-term volunteer experiences. And we go about facilitating those in both ways. When Neighborlink first started, and our kind of a core vision is creating an opportunity in an environment where those individuals can self-select their own project, connect directly to the homeowner, work out all the details. And our job really is just to support that activity as much or as little as needed. So throughout the week, we are constantly having volunteers coming, choosing their projects, mobilizing themselves, and we don't really know what's going on until we see the completed project, button, emails that have come through.
Mm-hmm.
But we also have staff dedicated to facilitating the volunteer experience as well now. So if a group comes to us, we'll help them navigate the site, find the project, work with them, and kind of walk them into the decentralized portion. So we will help them for 2 or 3 projects and really kind of coaching and encouraging them along the way to find their own project and keep going in that direction. So we're about 940 projects this year. We hope to get back up to the number we were last year of about 1,400 projects, given COVID's impact. But yeah, roughly 1,300 to 1,500 projects a year completed. Everything ranging from roofing to plumbing to yard work, cleaning, painting, anything that kind of goes wrong with a home, we get requests for and really see volunteers do throughout the year at different volumes.
Well, we're doing a lot of programming and talking around here around the subject of neighboring, and getting people connected with their neighbors, and use that word being connectors, which is a lot of what extension is about as well, being connectors. So those aspects really piqued my interest in this, and the fact that you've been able to kind of franchise this, I guess that's the right word, out to other communities. I have to tell you, I have a neighbor a couple of streets over from me that I knew it had come up one time in conversation that he grew up in Fort Wayne, Indiana. And so after I'd watched a couple of your videos and podcasts, I gave him a call and said, Ken, what do you know about Neighborlink in Fort Wayne? Well, he left Fort Wayne 30 years ago.
Okay.
And he said, I've never heard of that. And he was kind of critical. So I've never been so glad to leave someplace, Fort Wayne was on the skids. I was glad to get out of there, things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But I have seen in the last 10 years, Fort Wayne being on lots of lists about best places in America to live, and a place to do business, top place to raise your family, those types of things. And I'm going to give you and your group effort, a lot of the credit for that. I think I would assume that it has helped change the whole conversation in the community, kind of the personality, the culture of the community. Have you seen that, or am I just?
No, I think so. At the heart of Neighborlink, we care far more about relationships than we do about projects. We recognize that the methodology for moving and the method for getting people moving towards action in the right direction requires an antiquated model of transactional service. Like, we're used to volunteers and we're used to transactional nature, but it's in the way we communicate and the way that we set it up that really begins trying to transform that. It's far more about relational connectivity and internal awareness of who your neighbor is. And so if you begin with the idea that, like, yes, Neighborlink is an online bulletin board, we facilitate hundreds of volunteer projects each year, and at the surface level or at the beginning level, we're just doing communication beautification, housing maintenance, helping various demographics. But below the surface, and where we're trying to get people to go, is developing a greater awareness for your place in your neighborhood, which could be defined in a lot of different ways. A very practical neighborhood of where you live, but the same principles in which you find and live out in Neighborlink can take place in any neighborhood, urban or suburban. It's creating an awareness. Most of our volunteers, if they engage for a while, will begin going back to their own neighborhoods and starting to gain awareness of what's broken or what are the things that are standing out. So if you've responded to somebody's yard mowing project and you've been doing that for a couple of weeks in an urban neighborhood and you're seeing everyone else's yard being mowed and this one isn't, then now you understand that there's circumstances behind that door, not just somebody that doesn't care. And so when you're driving back into your own rhythms in your own neighborhood, you start to see maybe that long grass yard in your own neighborhood in a different way. And if you get the courage to go and knock on that door, then you begin to maybe see things differently. But it really is a process in trying to help individuals become aware of vulnerabilities in and around them, the nature of neighborhoods. I believe we see the brokenness all around us, and the opportunities to step into that. It's those things that nobody else takes responsibility for are the things that begin the journey if you want to facilitate neighborhood development. So practically, we do a lot of transactions, but because we've been doing this so long, we have incredible data on neighborhood stability. We've been doing some research around what makes a neighborhood healthy, studying urban neighborhoods and trying to identify what are the socioeconomic determinants of a neighborhood combined with the qualitative aspects of what neighbors believe about their neighborhood in order to develop programs. One of the things that Fort Wayne, one of the things we celebrate is we have like 250 different neighborhoods. So we take a much smaller approach to neighborhood definitions. So neighborhoods are much smaller than some other areas, which is great because it gives the opportunity for increased identity. The challenge is it takes a lot more energy from a city perspective to be able to serve each one of those neighborhoods in an individual way. So we're not doing as good of a job at a city level of really investing in neighborhoods or bringing them to a new light, which is why Neighborlinks of the world exist, I guess. But
yeah, well, you're contributing, and the efforts are contributing to those top three factors that people want in neighborhoods, or what I've been seeing. It's safe, clean, or good appearance, and friendly.
Yeah,
and your efforts are contributing to all three of those.
Yeah. When you frame it around those things, it's so much easier, or I find it so much more accessible to create improvement than where the higher level approach to neighborhood development usually exists, especially for urban neighborhoods. Most of it's top down, big projects, this will change and support everything, which certainly is true in many ways. Yet it's disconnected from what neighbors really want today. They may be able to relate to that thing and be able to identify in the economic opportunity of it, yet not necessarily be able to say, well, this is what I need today. And so when we focus on those things and begin to respond to those, it says it's more accessible. Like anybody can pick up trash or plant some flowers, or make sure the leaves are raked in the fall to a greater extent. So the opportunity is so much higher for outside groups or organizations like Neighborlink or anybody that wants to make an impact. Is you can begin tomorrow and know that you're making a difference, even though it might be small. The reality is everybody's watching in a neighborhood. They understand when things are different and they want to know why it's different.
Yeah.
When that's brought with some hope and intentionality and not some false pretense, then people can really get behind it and usually want to join in. I mean, there's a ton of people in every neighborhood that are sitting on the fence waiting for something good to start so they can join it, just like the same of bad.
Yes. There's two ladies in Iowa, two community development specialists that have a website, a program called Save Your Town on the web. And they send out videos and weekly reminders, some free, some charged. But and in fact, I was on a call yesterday with some folks where we got talking about one of their key topics. They talk a lot about creating idea-friendly communities. And what you just kind of articulated about starting small is really that idea-friendly concept. They're all about trying lots of different things, throwing lots of different things against the wall, not getting groups together and planning these big, huge multi-block festivals with concerts and speakers, and things that take massive organization and things, but instead starting small and trying these different things, being friendly toward all ideas and seeing what sticks.
Yeah.
It gives everybody a chance to jump in. It creates some of this energy. It doesn't just wear everybody out immediately at the beginning, but you're like just raking a few yards, planting some planters. I mean, it all helps create that sort of synergy and energy, whether it's a neighborhood or they talk more about, whole communities. But the concept's really kind of the same.
Sure.
So a town like Republic, say they're wanting to franchise or connect with Neighborlink, what are some of the initial steps they need to kind of take to make that partnership, make that happen?
Yeah, so when we reproduce a Neighborlink to a new city, each new Neighborlink has to be, essentially is becoming its own 501c3 or as a fiscal sponsor from a like-minded organization. So we've done, since 2008, we've reproduced in 15 other cities, and we've done in one of two different ways. One, it's just a carbon copy. So it becomes Neighborlink Indianapolis, for instance. A group of individuals identify, they connect to Neighborlink, they learn about it. It usually is connected or relating to some work that they've already been doing. So they have good idea and experience of this type of work being played out in their community. And then the first step for them is to identify, are you interested in really establishing a new organization, creating a board of directors, finding who's going to take ownership of it, establishing relationships to both identify the need and potential volunteer groups. It's less about volume for us as much as can you build the structure and build the buy-in. And our startup costs are really only like $3,500 to license a website, which really just covers our cost to get the new website up and going. It's our vision to let the model go for as cheaply as possible and allow each group to kind of take it from there. So we've done that a number of times, and we've also licensed technology. We actually, our third Neighborlink was in St. Louis. We partnered with an organization called Mission St. Louis, and they were focused in on one specific neighborhood, doing more comprehensive neighborhood development work and strategy work. But it was in a neighborhood that had a lot of older individuals and a lot of independent housing. And so they were uncovering a whole lot of needs, and they had a whole bunch of church groups and individuals wanting to come and serve and help, but it wasn't necessarily the connection to their model. And so what they attempted to do was bring the technology into play within their organization, put up a bulletin board, because they also didn't do a lot of this home maintenance, home repair stuff. That wasn't really part of their core vision, but they were getting a lot of requests to do is be able to honor the relational connectivity that they're establishing with neighbors in their neighborhood in this way, to be able to gather information, saying, well, we might not be able to help with this directly, but if you can give us your information, we can get it online. And then we have these groups that want to come in and connect on a regular basis, and maybe we can start doing some service events. And so they took the technology, really weaved it into their existing organization. So it was Community Loop was the name that they chose for that. And it was all part of Mission St. Louis. And they did that for 2 or 3 years and really worked it out. So they would bring on projects, they would facilitate these groups, did a number of projects. Eventually, they just recognized the tool itself was a little bit more than what they needed for the type of work they were doing. And so they no longer wanted to be an affiliate at that model. We called those non-affiliates. So it works in a couple of different ways to where we can license it or create an affiliate network.
Okay. And if they're an affiliate, then they, in terms of being their own entity, they really need to have an organization or an individual, somebody who can answer phones, for example, like you were describing, and kind of handle the input, the logistics there. And that's usually more of someone who's freestanding and identified as Neighborlink, or do some people do that as there's already an umbrella organization in the town that kind of takes this on under them and runs it as part of their, maybe you have a food pantry and they decide to take on Neighborlink and they handle the phone calls and the management of it Does it work that way?
It could work in a variety of ways, really.
Okay.
What we just want to know is who's going to be ultimately responsible for the operations on a day-to-day basis, and is that within kind of a normal board-governed structure? Whether that's creating a new independent thing or partnering with an existing organization. There's a lot of different ways based on what's happening in that local community. So we have grace and understanding that each local community and those involved operate a little bit differently.
Mm-hmm.
What we're trying to do is preserve that the mission works, and that over the last 17 years, like there's a certain framework in which Neighborlink has to work within, and if we can get to the understanding of that, then great. How it functions operationally, there's a lot of gray there.
Okay. All right.
So Andrew, does the city ever just take, like David used the Republic example, would a city ever just take that on and be their project themselves and run Neighborlink, for different neighborhoods? I mean, has that ever happened before?
We've not launched with any city governments. What we have this year, we've been contacted by 3 city governments, more so than any other year. I think the cities that are a little more progressive in their ideology in terms of what we do for our neighbors and our residents see the opportunity to create a closed loop system and scale what they're already doing. But we've not done that yet. So chances are it's probably an unsustainable model. I think a city government could be helpful in getting one started and maybe provide some additional resource or some staff time. But I really think for its sustainability, based on how I've seen other cities run programs, that at any time it could be cut. Like they could start it this year and something drastic would change, and they were like, well, we just can't do this anymore.
Yeah.
Admin change or something like that.
Right.
I just think they put so much effort into nuisance and, other types of, violations,
Code enforcement.
Yeah, code enforcement, yeah.
It would really come down to, so not many cities that I know of really have a closed loop system for the code violations. So they'll be the enforcement and assign them, but they're not necessarily in the business of like completing those projects. And so I could also imagine from the public that it would be challenging for a city to be the enforcer and now the completer, if you will, or taking some responsibility for closing that loop.
Yeah.
Yeah, I can see that.
We work with our city government really closely. We get community development block grants to take on bigger projects. So we work with our community development department. We work closely with neighborhood code. They send and refer a lot of projects and also give us a ton of grace if we have volunteers that are engaging in those projects. So we have good, close working relationships and even some funding streams that come to be able to help. But so far, at least in Fort Wayne or any of the other cities, it's usually the private sector or kind of the nonprofit sector that's fixing things.
Yeah. Well, the other unique thing about the timing is Republic has just begun the process of updating their comprehensive plan. We call it SOAR 2040. And just by sheer luck, not exactly sure how it happened. I'm on the comprehensive plan team. It's mostly city people, and then they tapped 6 to Republic too. So you can probably imagine the types of things I'm going to be talking about in that comprehensive plan over and over and over until they're sick of hearing from me. But I think, Jay, you make a good point. You can almost make it part of the, fabric of the community a little bit in some way.
It has to be the right community, I think. I mean, and I don't think it'd be easy. I think Andrew's right. There's all kinds of stumbling blocks there, but maybe in something where you're kind of visioning for the future, there might be a time to start at least, starting that process. And then there may be religious groups or different other groups that are going to, kind of jump on that bandwagon because, and even university, jump on that bandwagon as far as volunteers and things like that. So I think it might be able to work. It just takes a lot of coordination.
It fits with both of them. When you talk to even city leaders or other groups about neighboring, everybody loves the idea. Everybody slaps you on the back and says, that was fantastic. Boy, go get him. That is really good. And then just, hush. I'm still searching for this magic formula that makes people go from just saying that's a great idea into implementation, right into saying, oh, that's a great idea, into taking action.
Yeah, me too, David.
and we've been hammering away on, Dave Runyon wrote a book called Art of Neighboring, and he talks about setting the bar really low. All they ask you to do is learn the names of your neighbors.
Yeah,
They setting it so low. And I had taught a class back in the winter, and I had 12 people in it, and we met 8 times. Oh yeah, this is great. Give me my neighborhood chart. I'm going to fill it out. I'm going to learn everybody's names. And so I did a follow-up 2 weeks ago, and one of the 12 had actually learned the names of their neighbors. And I was kind of discouraged by that because they were all in that class because they were enthused about it. And so I'm just not sure what this magic component is exactly. I mean, for me, it's my Christian faith that has caused me to step out and to do that. That's the magic formula for me.
Yeah.
What it is to get other people to take that action to at least learn their neighbors' names and interact with their immediate neighbors. I don't know. Maybe it is, like you said, seeing other people take that action. Maybe that's what it is.
It does. I think what's been helpful for me over the last decade is recognizing like what really provokes human behavior. Like why do we individually make the decisions that we do on a day-to-day basis? And there's always a value proposition at play in many terms. So I find that it's really helpful when we're developing programs or thinking about the effectiveness of programs to think much like a consumer. How do we develop things that people will choose? Like, every day we have so much time and so much resources, regardless of your socioeconomic background. You're constantly making the best decisions for you at that day with the information you have and where you're at emotionally or physically. And so if everybody is in that decision-making mode, what really creates behavior change or moving in that direction? And so the idea that consumer behavior plays a huge part in this concept of neighboring, that we're always evaluating what is in this for me? What do I need? We're trying to get our needs met. We're trying to protect ourselves. We're trying to protect our assets and valuations. And so in a neighborhood that changes week to week, day to day, season to season as individuals. I might be down and I might be more intentional than others to get to know my neighbors' names because I understand things maybe at a different level, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they do. However, how do I provoke them to take a step forward in a direction that's either helpful for themselves or helpful for the neighborhood? And I think that's helpful. The other aspect is some of the research I have done on volunteer stuff is, 85% of like volunteerism is driven by social motivation. It's less about like the purpose behind something as much as who invited me and in what capacity. So people are really motivated by a social motivation, which is why, most things are done in service event models and who shows up, and you really start asking them why they showed up. And it's usually because somebody like called me and texted me, invited me, and it's more of a social activity than it is about like what we're trying to do. And so the programmatic of recognizing like, oh, the program matters and how we execute. But then when we get people engaged, what is our message? How do we follow up? What are we taking the time to debrief or follow up and those things? Some of the programs for neighboring that we're working on and starting to scale are like a homeowner incentive program. And we've had great success. And in some of our urban neighborhoods, one of the things is neighborhood associations typically just have plenty of great ideas. They know what's wrong in their neighborhood more so than anyone. What they often lack is capacity or resources to do anything about them. So you can walk around and work with a neighborhood association and they can identify, you know what, all these homes in our neighborhood need painted. Well, our neighborhood's not looking great. Well, you can't just go on to somebody's doorstep and say, you really need to paint your house this summer. It's looking kind of bad or whatever it is. So we've created an incentive program. It's really basic. It's a matching grant. So we address homeowner beautification through we put $3,000, first come, first serve. If you choose to make a homeowner beautification project this year, we'll reimburse you up to $300. And we started to see year after year in a few neighborhoods where 3,000 would turn into 30,000 in trackable homeowner improvements. And so now you've kind of created a way not only to create engagement, you're incentivizing the behavior that people already know. What we're really trying to do is get that person off the fence this year rather than not waiting until next year. If we can do that each year. And then we've been tracking the qualitative and kind of planting the seed of like, hey, did you do more than you thought you would? Or did you notice any of your neighbors take on projects after you started your own? And we want to collect that data for long-term tracking, but we're also kind of doing that to plant the seed of like, are you paying attention to what's happening in and around you? And we've done that in a number of neighborhoods over the last 3 years locally, and trying to see which neighborhoods perform better than others with that, but they're all generating 200 to 300+% return on investment.
Wow. Well, I appreciate all the research you're doing too, and you've made some of that available on your website and videos in the first year of the study here with Purdue that you've been doing, and
Yep.
I found that valuable and really appreciate you making that available. And I'll be keeping an eye on it for the second phase of information too out of that. So
yeah, well, we recognize that it's going to just takes professional energy to move things forward, and so we're attempting to learn what that takes. It's stepping in and being willing to do what nobody else really wants to do. And then, and that goes for data collection. I mean, so much of the first phase and what we're doing in the second phase is recognizing, like, if we go as individuals or as a neighborhood association, city government is going to do infrastructure projects on a schedule and a cycle, and they're going off spreadsheets and external, previously recorded data. They're not making it into the neighborhood every day. And so if you can go and start doing the infrastructure research for them, you're more likely to raise your projects and your needs up above others. You can go and complain about a few sidewalks, but until you get parcel to parcel data and say, you know what, yes, here's these handful of sidewalks, but we've documented 450 parcels in our neighborhood, and of a ranking of five being great, one being terrible, 60% are 3 or below. Like, oh, well, we didn't know that. That's not necessarily part of that. And we have pictures for it all. So if you want to sort through 400, parcels. So we're just trying to help neighborhoods take that approach. Like any neighborhood could do that. And the more research and the more systematic approach to those things, the more likely you're going to get people and governments that are disconnected from you to move towards you. Simple things.
Yeah. Well, there's a lot here to to ponder and to consider and to pull together. And I know
probably giving you more than you're asking for.
No, this has all been great. I know it's going to be part and parcel of a bigger discussion that we'll be having in Republic with several partners and trying to get the energy and the excitement to move forward with something out there. I think it's a great town to try a model here in Missouri. It's it has a lot of neighborhoods with older homes and some needs, but it's also had 20% growth in the last 2 decades. So you got a lot of young families and young neighborhoods and things that have come in too. So I don't know. I see a lot of elements that would make this really a good place to implement.
Sure.
In Republic. So.
Well, I was going to say Neighborlink can get started with $5,000 a year. Like, if you can get it up and going, and somebody's willing to donate their time, or you can find a partnership to just hear they answer the phones, and somebody who will be willing to lead consistently lead projects over the course of a year. Mm-hmm. Just finding $5,000 for some marketing and communication work, and just making sure that you have the resources required to execute the projects. So you don't have to put on roofs. You don't have to build ramps. You can do all of those things. if people want to fundraise and get that going. But just having paint and supplies and basic things, you can do a whole lot to prove the model in a short period of time.
In fact, all these communities I mentioned all now have their own community foundations.
Okay.
It's part of a larger regional, but they're affiliates, and Republic does as well. And the president of that has already, I've been filling her in on some of this information. I think her interest is peaked in what it could be. And so I think, 5,000 is a real doable amount.
Yeah.
If we can get everybody at the table and in agreement and wanting to push forward.
Sure.
So, well, Andrew, I know you're busy and you have a lot of obligations, not the least of which is your podcasts that you do, which are great. And thank you for doing those.
Well, I need to get back on it. It's been a slow season.
Well, those have been good. In fact, I just watched the one you did on using your children or doing neighboring with your children.
Yeah.
With your wife, and that was really good.
Thank you for that. Yeah, it's been a journey. We moved into an urban neighborhood intentionally, and trying to live it out as best we can.
Yeah, and small steps.
Jay, I cut you off. Did you?
No, it was nothing earth shattering. I was gonna tell David. I said I already knew when he started talking about the art of neighboring. I'm pretty good about knowing all my neighbors around me, but I haven't really reached out too far beyond those immediately around me. But it's mostly because of moles. We have this thing about trapping moles, and I've become like the neighborhood mole trapper. So when anybody gets a mole, I bring my traps over, and we have these long conversations about how do we get rid of moles. And so it's one time I thought, man, I may just start a career out of this. But, it takes me a long time to catch a mole, so I'm probably not gonna. I don't make much per mole. So, but it is funny what how many relationships I can build just about basically failing to catch moles in somebody else's yard.
Yeah.
That's like a couple of $8 traps, mole traps. It's all it amounts to.
Hey, well, you've put yourself in a position to learn what nobody else wants to learn. So you immediately become an asset, Jay.
I added that value that you mentioned there. What do the clients want? There you go.
Well, Andrew, again, I really appreciate your time. I know we'll be in.
All right. Well, I don't know if some of you also have mole stories, if you've used moles or other things to connect with your neighbors, but hopefully there were several things you could glean from that conversation, both at a community level and a neighborhood level. But we have time. We wanted to open it up for Q&A and just freewheeling whatever folks want to visit about or share about. Maybe you have something go on in your community that you're doing, or maybe you have some questions to ask. Feel free to unmute yourself and speak up.
Chet, you need to unmute.
I have to unmute.
Well, Chet does.
I saw, thanks, Kenny. I saw a good question from Lydia in the chat about what prevents people from neighboring. I think that would be a good discussion to better understand, what those hesitations are, so we can develop strategies to and to provide solutions for options for those folks with similar feelings.
Yeah, I'd love to hear what others think on that. I hear time mentioned a lot. I'm too busy, and you do have to be willing to have some margin in your life and be willing to be interruptible. Do neighboring. But things can present themselves. For example, our dryer quit this weekend in the middle of doing laundry. It's 18 years old. We know we're not going to put money into fixing it, so we've got a new one. But with stimulus money that came out, everyone is ordering appliances, and so the Lowe's that we got it from, it's about 4 weeks before they can make the delivery. even though they have it in their warehouse. And so we're being forced to take our laundry to neighbors that we've gotten to know over the last year and ask for help. Can we use their dryer? And so far, everybody has said yes. And that's an interesting opening then to conversations and interaction with your neighbors, even if it's just using a dryer. So there can be lots of things that open those opportunities. But you do have to take the time. But there may be other things that hold people back. What do others think?
Okay, well, go ahead and come on and we'll see how that goes. So, thank you.
Oh, so one of the comments is about the fear of rejection can be real too, and a barrier. And some people don't want to feel like they're someone's charity case. And yeah, I think some folks have a real hard time with even receiving the gift of help. We've gotten out of that habit.
David, I was listening to the podcast, The Neighbor Next Door. I think Matt and Adam
Yes,
at
Wichita,
the
Kansas.
neighboring movement. To that point, I think they had an episode where they talked about asking for support from a neighbor is actually more effective and can be more impactful as a way to get to know your neighbor. And I think that would solve for neighbors not feeling like a charity case. I think they referenced the famous example of Benjamin Franklin, who had a pretty opposing nemesis in Congress or some political body. And the way he got around that was he knew the other person was had a fine collection of books. So he asked to borrow a book, and he promptly returned it soon after with a thank you note. And that nemesis ended up turning into be, one of his allies and friends. So I think asking for a cup of sugar or to borrow a tool or help moving, a heavy piece of furniture will do just as much. And I think more folks might be willing to support than they would be necessarily willing to proactively accept or ask for help from someone they don't know that well yet.
I think there's an arc of what happens in your own neighborhood. The neighborhood that my parents retired to was a neighborhood where most of my mother's siblings lived. And as they aged, they had been outside, they'd mentored each other's children that were younger. And then that incorporated the neighbors' children. So my mother had kids pick flowers. She did contracts with children for yard work with the permission of their parents. So by involving, the surprise kids that come, postmenopausal sometimes for some women, certainly one of the siblings for my mom, it opened a whole world for them. But also it was not unusual in Southeast Springfield, Missouri, for families to live in the same neighborhoods. So, that can be a slight little door opener too. For me, it's just moving in from the country into the city when you haven't lived here in a while. And then just the difference in population. When I look at the neighbors here, these are incredibly busy people. And I didn't want to live in a retirement community. I wanted to live in a diverse neighborhood. So people do only have a limited amount of time, and you have to be more strategic in what you are saying or doing with them. And so, the whole idea of catching moles to build some camaraderie would make good sense. I can recall one property my husband and I lived on. We had a dog who learned how to catch moles from a neighbor's dog. they became celebrities. Like, you know, can I borrow your dog? Yes. So,
I love that. Lydia mentioned in chat too that one challenge may be just making neighboring a priority. And I think that is a big hindrance. And that's part of why we've been initiating these conversations and doing some of the programs and things that we're doing and things, just bringing this to people's attention that how their neighborhood, how their community, and how their own life benefits if you make neighboring a bit more of a priority and keep that the forefront of your mind on some things that you can do. So just awareness helps make it a priority, perhaps.
mhm.
And then Andrew talked a little bit about, you know, what it is that motivates people to invest their time in a neighborhood. What any thoughts on that? What motivates people? What motivates you, maybe?
Um, I think home ownership, or, you know, just pride in home where you're renting. The neighborhood in Southeast Springfield where my mother and her siblings lived turned into a rental neighborhood. So the remaining 4 of them became the homeowners, and then the rest of the people were renters. But it wasn't a situation where the neighborhood degraded because people had an interest in being close to work and, you know, raising their families in a nicer school to them. So I think it's just having a bit of pride in what goes on. One of the neighbors, my mother and her siblings lived well into their 90s. So one of the neighbors would take tiny little bits of food to them. That was one of the biggest joys I ever had, to see that people who my mother had taken care of were taking care of them. So, you know, like you, David, I feel like it's a stepping out in faith. And then, you know, having been a nonprofit manager in the past, I can tell you that it's also just a matter of repetition. You didn't actually fail, you just continue to step out. You just continue to try to chip away a little bit at your own, I guess, perceptions of what the neighbors are, and then your own reality of it. Unfortunately, my tree trimming people are coming today instead of tomorrow, so I'm going to leave the meeting. So,
Well, I know we're at that 1 p.m. mark, a little bit afterwards, and I'm always glad to communicate with people by email or on our Facebook page or whatever afterwards. They give you just a couple of quick announcements as we wrap up. Because of your feedback that many of you have given by email and other formats, this was originally designed to be a 6-session program, but because of your feedback, it's actually going to be an ongoing class, an ongoing meeting that we'll continue doing as long as there's interest. And as part of that, we want to keep hearing from more of you. This question and answer part, I think, is important, but also I'm going to continue to glean mentions in chat and your backgrounds as well when you enroll, looking for other class members that can be our presenters and can talk about what they've done in the area of neighboring as part of this class, so we can expand who we hear and learn from. So in February, the next 2 upcoming sessions. February, we have the topic that relates to some of the questions that class members have had. We'll be looking at how neighboring can overcome loneliness and fear, how to develop healthy relationships, and how to communicate well with people who look different from you. Our live presenter for that will be Amber Allen, who is a human development specialist for MU Extension and actually teaches some classes along those lines, along those topics. And then in March, we'll be hearing from Chet in Ohio. I think Chet may have just logged off. He'll be presenting what he's done to develop a culture of neighboring on his street in Ohio. It's led to a whole manual even on some different leadership approaches and things in your neighborhood. And then in March, there will also be a bonus program that I'll be sending information out on how you can register for it. It'll be a program with Melanie Warnock, who is the author of the book, This Is Where You Belong. You may be familiar with that book. It was a New York Times bestseller, Melanie Warnock. And that'll be a bonus opportunity in March. So as we close today, and many of you have already checked out, if you wouldn't mind, give some feedback in chat, maybe about something you learned today or picked up from this class. Would be glad to hear from you. Otherwise, the recording of this will go out in the next day or two, maybe Monday, and we'll keep the conversation going. Thank you for joining us. Glad to have you here. Love to see your feedback in chat if you have a moment to share something you learned in today's class. Thanks for the feedback. Glad to hear these can be helpful to folks.